discover how this incredible woman turned laughter into triumph with a 100K engine revival. Sarah wiped the grease from her hands onto the rag tucked in her back pocket, her laugh echoing against the concrete walls of the garage. In the small town of Maplewood, where gossip traveled faster than the autumn breeze, her presence as a mechanic turned heads, not always in admiration. She inherited her father's gift for fixing things, yet each day felt burdened by the weight of his absence and the soaring expectations stitched into the fabric of the community. The echo of car engines and her children's laughter intertwined. But underneath that, a storm brewed in her mind. "Mom, can I help?" her son Joey asked, eyes sparkling as he tossed a wrench from one hand to the other. "Just watch, buddy. I'm almost finished here," she replied, the truth gnawing at her. Every moment she spent fixing cars pulled her deeper into the history of her father, provoking simultaneous pride and grief. In that old barn, now cloaked in dust and memories, she had found something extraordinary, her father's prototype engine waiting to be resurrected. But doubt crept into her heart as she imagined the townspeople's cynical chuckles. "What can a woman possibly know about engines?" echoed in her ears. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The stakes escalated painfully when word spread of a 100K prize for the first working model of an engine, an enticing lure that tugged at both ambition and despair. The anticipation bubbled in the air, yet all she felt was a tightening grip of anxiety around her throat. Competing against Mark, an old classmate who treated her like one of his tools, revolted her. With every second that passed, her insecurities simmered. Was she just a mom in a town that might never see her as more? Days blurred into nights as she toiled under the dim garage light, her children asleep on a makeshift bed nearby. With every spark and sputter of the old engine, memories of her father pierced her determination like a sharpened tool. She remembered his laughter, his insistence on never letting gender dictate ability. Yet the silence of the townsfolk pushed her into a spiral of doubt. Why would they believe in her when she barely believed in herself? Bills loomed ominously, expecting payment, just like the pressures unfolding around her. Finally, she stood before the prototype, her heart raging like the idling engine before her. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her father's legacy, proving to herself and her children that she could rise above expectations and fears. As she connected the wires for the first public test, adrenaline surged through her veins, fueled by an equal mix of hope and trepidation. If the engine roared to life, it could ignite everything she dreamed of. Yet what if it fell short? What if she fell short? Standing there, facing uncertainty, a palpable tension hung in the air. As she turned the key in the ignition, the townsfolk gathered, all eyes trained on her, mouths agape in disbelief. In that moment, everything hinged on a sputter, a roar, a chance for freedom, or an echo of despair. Coins of doubt clattered through her mind, the full force of societal judgment veering toward her at full throttle, each heartbeat a reminder of the fear that gripped her. The engine sputtered ominously, leaving a wisp of smoke hanging around them like the precariousness of her dreams. Will she emerge triumphant? Or will she get lost in the dust of the past? The engine coughed once more, and Sarah's heart sank further as silence enveloped the garage. The townspeople shifted uncomfortably, whispers rising and falling like waves against a rocky shore. Each pulse of disappointment felt like a knife twisting in her gut. The laughter that had once echoed inside had transformed into an unbearable weight. As the smoke cleared, it unveiled not just the failings of mechanical parts, but the fragments of her self-belief crashing to the ground. Mark's presence loomed large, his silhouette cutting through the gathering crowd. His smirk was unmistakable, a cruel taunt glimmering in his eyes. Sarah clenched her fists, but even more than the mockery, it was the crushing realization that she had shared her hope with everyone that stung. She had laid bare her ambition, and it was met with a sputter. Would this be her legacy? A woman who failed where others succeeded? She swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. "Do you need a hand, Sarah?" Mark called out, feigned innocence dripping from his voice. The laughter that followed was like nails on a chalkboard, and it ignited a fire inside her. Perhaps she hadn't wanted to draw attention, but now she couldn't shy away from the challenge. She could stand firm, but only if she let herself be vulnerable first. Determination surged through her, desperate and fierce. She closed her eyes for a moment, the memories of her father flooding her mind. His laughter, his unwavering belief in her, pushed aside the stacked expectations of the town. It wasn't just about the engine anymore. It was about honoring a legacy, proving strength in the shadows of doubt. "Joey, can you grab me that toolbox?" she called out, experiencing a whirlwind shift from despair to focus. Her son scrambled toward her, encouraged by her newfound resolve. As he handed her the tools, a sense of calm began to wash over her. This was her element, the dance of creativity sparking between her hands and the metal she knew so well. With each action, she shifted gears mentally. The engine's components became not just parts but challenges she could conquer. She dissected the problem, reconnecting pieces, adjusting the timing, recalling everything her father had taught her about mechanics and, more importantly, about life. She could hear him whispering in the back of her mind, urging her not to give up. The crowd stood still, the tension palpable as she dove into the intricacies of the engine with methodical precision. The energy around her shifted subtly. Curiosity replaced judgment. Was this mechanic capable of reviving an old dream? A spark of hope ignited as she found a few misaligned screws, tightening them with newfound conviction. The moment of truth was near. Would she merely react to others' perceptions, or would she carve her own path? With every turn, her confidence surged as she executed revisions meticulously. Just as she prepared for the final adjustments, a flicker of vulnerability emerged. What if the fix wasn't enough? But then she remembered. The roar of her father's laughter in the garage, the joy that filled the space when they had achieved their own triumphs. Fighting her insecurities, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes, connecting the wires one last time, focusing on the lifeblood of the engine. As she gripped the ignition key firmly in her hand, she opened her eyes to the crowd. No longer filled with fear, they reflected anticipation. The townsfolk couldn't see the failure of a yard blink in her past. They could only witness a mother determined to uphold her father's legacy. This time, there was no hesitation. She locked eyes with Joey, his faith in her fueling her resolve. As she turned the key, she didn't just hope for a sputter. She envisioned the roar of an engine igniting dreams not only for herself, but for her children. The engine delivered a powerful chime, and Sarah felt her heart race in tandem with the revving sound. Could it be? The crowd held its breath as she leaned forward, bracing herself for the outcome. In that moment, it felt like the beginning of everything, until failure echoed again from within the engine. Yet a flicker of inspiration sparked within her. What if this setback was not an end, but a critical twist in her journey? She wouldn't walk away from uncertainty. She would challenge it, wrestle it until victory was wrenched from its grip. As she took a deep breath, a question loomed in her mind. Would she dare to face what came next, or would she concede to the doubts that still lingered? And in the depth of that challenge, would she discover something within herself far greater than any engine could ever produce? The engine wheezed again, mocking her new resolve. Sarah's heart raced not with fear, but with determination. Failure was no longer a possibility. Drawing on her spirit, she paced the garage like a lioness in search of her prey. The laughter from the crowd morphed into an assembly of spectators holding breaths, waiting for her to make a choice. This wasn't just about an engine, it was a crucible for her spirit. Joey stared at her, his youthful eyes wide with expectation. In that gaze, she saw not just admiration, but a reflection of herself, his inquisitive nature a mirror to her own long-buried ambitions. Sarah shook off the weight of Mark's taunts echoing in her mind. She had grown accustomed to the scrutiny of others, but now she felt ready to wrestle with her own self-doubt. She wasn't merely a mechanic anymore. She was a mother, a fighter, a woman reclaiming her story, piece by piece. The next hiccup in the engine presented itself as a fanciful puzzle. She bent low and examined the wires, a jumble of fate and challenge intertwined. As she worked, her fingers deftly navigated the labyrinth of mechanics, each touch more intuitive than the last. Here, within the metal circuits, she began to rediscover her own rhythm, her past values of perseverance knitting together with her present belief in her capabilities. A thought crystallized in her mind. Each component of the engine represented a hurdle she had overcome or still needed to face. The sacrifices she'd made, the late nights spent fixing cars, the smattering of grease under her nails being tokens of her grit. Wasn't every setback, every laugh that she had endured in those fleeting moments, merely a tool in her growing arsenal of tenacity? Mark leaned in closer, sneering. You really think you're going to make it work, Sarah? What happens when it breaks down again? Every taunt, every moment of doubt only solidified her resolve. She straightened, her posture a testament to her defiance. You don't know me very well, she replied coolly, a hint of steel threading her voice. I'm just getting started. Reconnecting a spark plug, she felt a surge of energy ignite her spirit. In that single adjustment, she felt not a woman pushing against a mechanical system, but a warrior crafting her destiny, accruing strength from pause lessons, and unfurling it into this moment. The laughter that fringed her earlier efforts transformed into quiet murmurs of intrigue as the engine levitated between silence and potential. The crowd sensed it. There was something deeper at stakes now, something personal, cocooned in her determination. With each adjustment, she pieced together the fragments of her resolve. The engine became the embodiment of her own trials, a testament that resilience was not measured by the absence of failures, but the persistence to confront and conquer them. As she tightened each bolt, she sang the praises of her father's belief, feeling his presence wrap around her like an invisible armor. But unyielding tension thrummed in her veins as she neared the moment of truth again. She turned the ignition key, and her heart halted momentarily, obscured by trepidation. What if this attempt crumbled like the rest? But that thought didn't paralyze her. It triggered an unexpected clarity. With her hands steady, she summoned everything: her dreams, fears, and the remnants of her father's laughter. As the key twisted, she held onto a mantra she had quietly formed. Rise again. Rise stronger. The engine roared back to life, a jubilant melody twisting into the air, slicing through the tension like a hot knife through butter. A swell of triumph rippled through her, and she grinned wide, an outpouring of emotion erupting from deep within. This was more than a win. It was evidence of her rebirth. As the noise crescendoed and the crowd erupted in applause, she turned to Joey, the light in their eyes intertwining as they shared this stunning victory. But now, a burning question fluttered within her chest. If she could reclaim this piece of herself, what else lay dormant, waiting for the right spark to ignite it? Mark's sly smile faded, replaced by a glimmer of begrudging respect. Yet, she could sense it. The challenge was far from over. Would she be able to leverage this moment into an opportunity to carve a path forward? Or would the road ahead be fraught with even greater obstacles? The next chapter of her life beckoned with intensity. With the engine's deafening roar still echoing in her ears, Sarah could hardly catch her breath. The applause washed over her like a wave, overwhelming yet exhilarating. She took a moment to absorb the triumph that surged through her. She was not just Sarah, the mechanic. She was now Sarah, the fighter. Yet, as the adrenaline ebbed, reality set in. She had tasted victory, but would it linger? The whispers flitted around her like fireflies. The challenge wasn't merely about reviving an engine. It was about revitalizing her own essence. Joey's eyes sparkled with admiration, but as he approached, Sarah noticed a shift in his expression, a flicker of anxiety. "What now?" he asked tentatively, concern stitching his brow. The question hung in the air, a reminder of her responsibility to nurture that spark she had ignited not only in herself, but in others too. This moment was not solely for herself. How could she inspire Joey, motivate him to follow his passions fearlessly? She recalled her father's unyielding belief in her potential. She clasped Joey's shoulder, her steady gaze meeting his youthful eyes. "It's about more than just fixing engines, Joey. It's about believing you can rise when the world tries to make laughter of your dreams." As she spoke, herself began to unravel hidden truths layered beneath years of self-doubt. She envisioned the possibilities. Each setback had not just pushed her back, it had fortified her. Yet the doubt lingered. Could she carry this momentum? Sarah knew she needed more than just the thrill of the engine's revival. She needed a plan, a blueprint to navigate both her career and her newfound capabilities. She stepped back, observing her surroundings. The garage that had once felt confined was now a canvas, a space ripe for growth. The victory lap around the garage was just the beginning. She envisioned powering through hitherto unexplored terrains of knowledge and skill. What if she dove deeper into the mechanics of performance vehicles? What if she took on bigger challenges? The prospect electrified her. Her fingers brushed the tools hanging from a wall, and an idea sparked. She would organize small workshops for aspiring mechanics, an opportunity to teach while solidifying her own knowledge. There was a wealth of experience inside of her aching to be shared. Engaging with others would force her to confront her vulnerabilities, push her to learn, and ultimately drive her forward. But the decision wouldn't come without risk. Would Joey step into this venture alongside her? Or would the overwhelms of self-doubt hinder him from taking that step? She could feel a familiar hesitance creeping in, but she pushed back against it. The whispers from Mark's mocking echoed again, reminding her of her worthiness in a space that often underestimated her. "I can do this," she muttered, drawing strength from her previous triumph. This was her chance to test the resolve she had just unearthed, and with that realization came a fervent determination. "Let's do it," she said, turning back to Joey with conviction. "Let's create a space where we can learn and grow together. We'll start next weekend. I want you to help me." Joey's face brightened with enthusiasm, and for the first time since the laughter had bounced off the garage walls, Sarah sensed an empowering energy within her. They would build something together, a community of mechanics, each harboring dreams, fears, and aspirations, ready to rise. As she planned their first workshop in her mind, another nagging apprehension poked at her gut. What would happen when Mark inevitably tried to tear her down again? This battle for recognition was far from over. She thought about her journey and the brutal truth. Every warrior faced enemies, both external and internal. "Be ready, Sarah," she whispered as she examined the engine one last time, poised as if it could grant her foresight. This new path would be fraught with just as much ridicule and challenge as joy and learning. But now, she realized she was not powerless. She could transform adversity into celebration. As Sarah stood there, casting a glance towards the horizon of her future, her heart quickened again. This time, however, it was not with doubt, but with the weight of opportunity warming her soul. The road ahead shimmered with uncertainty, but for the first time, uncertainty felt like the prelude to greatness. What awaited her on this course of personal and professional expansion? As she leaned closer to the glowing engine, she pondered the resultant ripple effects of her choices. What would it take for her to face those lurking shadows of doubt and turn them into allies? The journey was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The week flew by in a whirlpool of anticipation and preparation. Sarah was consumed with organizing details for the workshop, having set the date firmly in her mind. She gathered tools, created handouts, and sketched lesson plans. Each logistical step gave her a sense of purpose, yet it was intertwined with a nagging anxiety that threatened to overshadow her enthusiasm. Would her plan inspire others? Or would it crumble under the weight of her insecurities? As Saturday approached, she shifted her focus toward Joey, her steadfast ally. From the outset, he had displayed eagerness and curiosity, asking questions that reflected his engagement. Yet, during their planning sessions, she noticed moments of hesitance that mirrored her own doubt. "What if I mess up?" he had voiced one evening, the shadows of self-doubt darkening his youthful face. It struck a chord within her. The voice of doubt could hit people of all ages with equal ferocity. Confronting her own uncertainties, Sarah climbed deeper into her toolbox of self-awareness. She reminded herself that failure wasn't the end. It was an integral part of growth. If anything went wrong during their workshop, it shouldn't signify defeat. It should simply be a stepping stone on the path to improvement. She needed to project this confidence to Joey. "Look," Sarah told him one afternoon, her tone blending understanding with resolve. "Every great mechanic has experienced failure. The key is to keep trying, to learn." He nodded, though she could tell this mantra hadn't fully penetrated his mind. The day of the workshop dawned clear and bright, an external mirror to her internal complexity. She arrived early at the garage, heart racing, visualizing the sea of young faces eager to absorb her passion for mechanics. Yet a hollow feeling gnawed away at her confidence. She scanned the room, tools neatly arranged, posters of complicated diagrams plastered on the walls. But the sobering knowledge of Mark's harsh critique hovered. Would that voice return to haunt her? "Hey!" Joey's voice broke her reverie, snapping her back into focus. He grinned widely, amateur pride bubbling underneath the panic. "Ready?" "More than ever," she replied, though the words tasted of uncertainty. As participants started filtering in, Sarah stood straighter, reminding herself that transformation often lurked at the periphery of discomfort. Each new face was an opportunity to share knowledge and ignite a fire in someone else. She began to speak, the words flowing from a once-hidden well of authority. "Welcome to our first workshop on performance vehicles. I'm Sarah, and today we're diving into not just the nuts and bolts but what they can symbolize: grit, determination, and how to redefine what success means to you." Her voice, once quaking, now flowed like oil through an engine, smooth and powerful. As the session progressed, she engaged her audience with hands-on demonstrations, sparking lively discussions about intricate mechanical concepts. Joey, buoyed by the energy of the room, became her eager assistant. He contributed insights, framed questions that deepened understanding, and transformed that initial hesitance into infectious enthusiasm. Then, with a well-timed turn of events, Mark walked in. Sarah felt her heart drop, tension clawing its way back into her throat. He looked around, brow raised, doubt etched across his face. She braced herself for the caustic questions and the laughter that often followed them. But surprisingly, he remained silent, his condescension eclipsed by the vibrant energy radiating from the group. It occurred to Sarah then that her workshop wasn't just about teaching. It established a shield against Mark's dismissive tactics, exposing the core of what she had sought to build. This space was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone present, to all the dreamers eager to carve their unique paths in a world ready to scoff at them. With each passing minute, her confidence fortified. She even interjected some light-hearted exchanges with Joey, injecting laughter into the serious environment. Laughter that signified triumph over adversity and resilience against external doubt. But as she caught a glimpse of Mark, still hovering at the doorway, something deepened inside her. Was he merely an observer, or a lurking adversary ready to re-establish control? The day ended with applause not just for her, this new version of Sarah, but for every participant who dared to step up and embrace the challenge. Driving home, she was buoyant, but underneath that exhilaration a question nagged. Was this newfound confidence sustainable, or would Mark's specter return to shatter it? The celebration felt hollow, tinged with the realization that the journey of self-discovery had only just begun. Tomorrow could bring fresh challenges, and as she parked her car, a new tension gripped her. What would she do when faced with confrontation? The moment of truth loomed, ready to reveal what Sarah was truly made of. The sun struggled to rise against the dense clouds that loomed over Sarah's neighborhood the next morning, mirroring her internal struggle. Each droplet of rain hitting her window echoed the doubts that still crept around the edges of her confidence, like shadows refusing to be cast aside. Was yesterday's success just a fluke? What if Mark decided to undermine her at work today, wielding his cynicism like a weapon? As she prepared for her shift at the garage, Sarah's hands moved methodically, but her mind raced. The satisfaction from the workshop faded slightly with each thought of Mark's potential return. She wondered if his silence was merely a prelude to more incisive attacks on her abilities. Was it wise to walk into another day, knowing that her vulnerability could be exposed? Arriving at the garage, the familiar aroma of motor oil and rubber greeted her, a scent that should have recharged her. Instead, it felt suffocating. The clatter of tools and the hum of machinery played a comforting symphony, yet the anxiety clawed at her gut. She spotted Joey immediately, his youthful energy a stark contrast to her turbulent mental state. "Hey, Sarah!" he called with an infectious enthusiasm. "Ready to work on that performance car?" "Yeah, of course," she replied, her tone reflective of a resolve that hadn't fully taken root. But inside, she wrestled with her newfound identity. She recalled the pride in her voice during the workshop, and how it resonated with the attendees. Those moments were precious, and she needed to carry that energy into today's tasks. Her main concern was how she would rise above the suffocating presence of doubt and Mark's looming judgment. As the day unfolded, Sarah found herself more in tune with her surroundings. The chaotic rhythm of the garage pulsed around her, and with each turn of the wrench, she thought about the mechanics of self-discovery. Just as there was an art to fixing a car, there was an art to navigating interpersonal dynamics. As she instructed Joey on how to diagnose a performance issue in an engine, she wove in concepts of resilience. Sometimes, she explained, a car requires fine-tuning and patience. Just like us, when we face challenges, it's essential to adjust our approach in order to succeed. Joey listened, his eyes wide with comprehension. Perhaps the words resonated not just with him, but reminded her of her own necessity to adapt and refine her skills as an educator, as a professional, and ultimately, as a person. Each turn of the wrench was a reminder that mastery required persistence, and at times, shaking off self-doubt more forcefully than one would shake a stubborn bolt. The more engrossed she became in the tasks at hand, the more empowered she felt. Yet, an ever-present shadow warned her of Mark's potential assault. An uninvited tension loomed over their daily grind, one that Sarah could sense but not yet confront. Then, unexpectedly, the door swung open. Mark's thick figure filled the frame, the unsettled aura he carried bursting into the room. "I heard you think you're some kind of mechanic now. Let's see how you handle a real challenge," he sneered, his confident smirk an unmistakable sign of provocation. The air turned thick with unuttered words, and suddenly, all the foundations of her hard-won confidence felt precarious. The question that had been circling her mind all along surged forward like oil from a broken engine. Was she prepared to confront him? Sarah steadied her breath, summoning the kernel of strength gained from the workshop. "What do you have in mind?" she shot back, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. With Mark's challenge hanging expectantly in the air, she realized this moment was far more than just a test of her mechanical skills. It was an opportunity to confront the very specter that threatened her growth. The stage was set for an impending showdown. But what repercussions would follow her choice to stand her ground? This was her moment to showcase not just her mechanical prowess, but the person she was becoming. And as she locked eyes with Mark, something shifted within her. Could she not just fix a car, but also redefine her own narrative? The hammer lay heavy in her hand, ready to strike. Would she embrace the challenge, or allow Mark's shadow to loom over her yet again? Mark's smirk lingered in the air, a tangible taunt that seemed to mock her progress. She could feel her heart racing beneath her chest, a percussion that rang a steady beat of challenge and fear. In that moment, the world around her receded, the engine noise blending into a distant hum as all focus narrowed to the man before her. "What's the challenge?" she asked again, her voice firmer than she felt internally. This was not just a moment about mechanics. It was about self-definition, a line drawn between doubt and determination. Let's say we have a real issue, an engine that just won't turn over, no matter what you try. "Fix it," he taunted, leaning back against the workshop bench with an air of casual confidence. She felt the familiar twang of anxiety, the urge to retreat into the safety of inaction, but the frustration from their previous encounters pushed her forward. "What do I get if I do?" she asked, settling into the moment as the burn of challenge ignited something within her. "Respect," he replied, his voice laced with disdain, as if that word didn't belong in her vocabulary. "And maybe I'll stop calling you a second-rate mechanic." Their interaction was electric, words crackling in the air like charged wires. The others paused, knowing a spectacle was brewing, and curiosity flared amidst the tension. Sarah glanced at Joey, who wore an expression of awe, his admiration for her evident. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the knowledge she had cultivated. "All right," she declared firmly. "Let's see what I can do." Mark stepped aside, gesturing mockingly towards a defunct engine sitting in the corner. Its steel frame was grimy, coated with years of neglect. She approached it, her heart pounding, but more importantly, a flicker of excitement flared inside her. This was her chance not just to prove him wrong, but to align her identity with her aspirations. As she got to work, the familiar motions of disassembling the engine flowed through her. Each grip of the wrench, each turn of the bolt, came with a renewed sense of purpose. She recalled the concepts she had shared with Joey, weaving them into her thought process. Failure, she reminded herself, was not the end, but part of a learning curve that led to mastery. The engine lay under her hands, and with each step she took, she transformed her anxiety into strategy. Understanding the mechanics of the engine correlated more with the new mechanics of her life, the rebuilding of her confidence. She sensed Mark's eyes on her, trying to intercept her focus with skepticism. "Is this the best you can do?" he sneered, but that only fueled her determination. She had already come too far to turn back now, and beyond that, she was building more than just an engine. She was forging a version of herself that she could finally stand behind. Hours passed, the steady rhythm of her work harmonizing with the murmurs of the garage. She encountered setbacks, bolts that resisted her pull, and parts that were stubbornly stuck. Yet each frustration only heightened her resolve, teaching her patience. Slowly, methodically, she dismantled and rebuilt. The climax of her efforts approached. With the final pieces in place, she connected the battery and turned the ignition. Silence hung momentarily in the air before the engine broke into a throaty growl, a sound that vibrated through the room and ignited the curiosity of the others present. Cheers erupted around her, a sound of support, not just for the engine but for her as well. She beamed with pride, adrenaline surging as Mark's expression soured. "Not bad for a second-rate mechanic," she quipped, eyes glinting with newfound resolve. But as the moment settled in, a new dilemma established itself. Could she sustain this momentum against Mark's inevitable retribution? Tomorrow would not be just about mechanics, but about consolidating the roots she was now growing in her confidence. As she wiped her hands, the tumult of emotions began to settle. But one question loomed larger in her consciousness. What would it take to truly silence Mark and turn this small victory into a pillar of resilience? The following day dawned with a sharp brightness that seemed almost mocking, as if heralding the challenge that lay ahead. Sarah arrived at the shop early, her nerves dancing with the faint echo of yesterday's triumph. The engine that had roared to life was a testament to her abilities, yet lingering doubts clung to her like a shadow. Would her victory be solely a fluke, or could she fortify this newfound belief in herself? As she stepped inside, the familiar sights of the garage washed over her, a maze of tools and half-finished projects, but now they felt different, empowered. She breathed deeply, allowing the scent of motor oil and metal to ground her in the present. It was as if the air itself pulsed with potential. Mark was already there, visibly irritated as he leaned against a workbench, arms crossed. His demeanor told her everything she needed to know. He was brewing something ominous, intent on asserting his dominance once again. Well, if it isn't the miracle worker," he drawled, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Think yesterday's luck is going to carry over?" "I don't rely on luck," she shot back, her voice steady. The words tumbled out confidently, showing a resolve she hadn't fully realized was there until now. It was a beacon, shining defiantly against his dismissive demeanor. "Good. Because it's not about luck today. I've got another challenge for you," he proposed, an imperceptible glimmer of anticipation in his eyes. "A full suspension overhaul. If you can do that, I may just start treating you like a mechanic." Her pulse quickened. This task would test more than just her technical skills. It would demand her perseverance. The weight of his challenge pressed heavily, seeping into the corners of her mind where fear festered. But within that weight, there was also something else. A sense of belonging. A commitment to proving herself not just to him, but to herself. "Bring it on," she replied, the spark of determination igniting again. Wrapping her fingers around the tools as if they were extensions of her own will, she set to work. This wasn't merely about proving Mark wrong. It was about claiming her place in this world, a world that had often felt just beyond her grasp. Days blurred into one another as she dove deeper into the intricate workings of the suspension system. Mark, reluctant but intrigued, observed her movements with growing intensity. Each time she faced a setback, whether a stubborn bolt or an unexpected misalignment, she confronted it with a strategy that echoed what she had learned from her past mistakes. Focus became her ally. The other mechanics began to notice a shift, whispering amongst themselves, their skepticism yielding to hesitant respect. With Joey's support bolstering her resolve, she was willing to take risks, unafraid to tackle the complex problems unraveling before her. But just as she began to find her rhythm, Mark's tactics shifted. He introduced distractions, calling out from the sidelines to infuse doubt into her mind. His taunts now masked an admiration he refused to vocalize, but they only drove her to dig deeper. Each cut of his words was met with a calculated response. She was determined not to let his dismissiveness derail her focus. With the final adjustment in motion, she leaned against the suspension, her heart racing with anticipation. A cleansing breath steadied her hands as she readied for the moment of truth. Would the system hold? She flicked the ignition, adrenaline rushing as she awaited the sound. The engine jerked but stabilized, a low rumble filling the opens like a heartbeat. The suspension worked seamlessly, responding to every command with grace. As cheers erupted again, her heart soared. She could see it in Mark's eyes, finally a crack of recognition. And though the feeling of victory washed over her, new questions arose. Was this respect the solid ground she had been searching for, or merely a fleeting recognition that would slip through her fingers? Determined to secure her footing, she knew the stakes had shifted. The triumph was sweet, but sustaining it held the promise of deeper battles ahead. What strategies would she need to employ to affirm her rightful place in this world of mechanics? The battle with Mark was far from over, and she could feel the undercurrents of their conflict beginning to swell. The confrontation, her confrontation, was yet to come. The murmur of approval still echoed in Sarah's ears as she wiped her hands on a rag, the remnants of grease a testament to her hard work. Yet the fleeting victory felt surprisingly empty, highlighted by Mark's piercing stare. He had shifted his strategy like a chess player anticipating her next move, and just like that, the challenge escalated. She moved into the next project, determined to quell any lingering doubts spiraling in her mind. A barely functional sports car sat within the bay, its vibrancy dulled by layers of grime and neglect. She could see potential. It pulsed beneath the surface like a heart waiting to be revived. What was once a source of doubt now became her canvas, a blank slate to showcase her growth. As the shop buzzed with chatter, she pulled on her gloves and set to work, methodically disassembling the components with a newfound confidence. Each click of the wrench was a note in her symphony of self-discovery, and for the first time, she could hear it clearly. The voices of the other mechanics faded as she lost herself in the rhythm of the task. But even in her focus, Mark's presence lingered like a storm cloud. Hovering nearby, he watched with intensity, waiting for a misstep to pounce upon. Today was different, though. She was not here to please him. She was here to honor her journey. "Think you can polish that rust bucket into something worth driving?" he called out, his tone tainted with mockery. Sarah paused for a moment, heart racing. She could feel the adrenaline surging, the urge to retaliate boiling beneath the surface. Instead of snapping back, she forced a smile, channeling her energy into resolution. "You'd be surprised what skill and persistence can create." Mark's expression faltered, the subtle shift almost imperceptible. Did he sense the change within her? Did he underestimate her tenacity? She basked in this realization, a protective shield forming against his derision. As she continued dismantling the car's components, she became lost in internal dialogues. What if she failed? What if the car never started again? Every insecurity that had once cornered her began to dissolve under her steady determination. She had learned to celebrate her mistakes, seeing them not as failures but as the stepping stones to mastery. Days turned into a blur of calculations and adjustments. The other mechanics no longer whispered, but rather observed. They offered advice, unprompted. The tide was turning. With each detail she perfected, an invisible foundation was building, her reputation solidifying inside the garage. The car was approaching completion when Mark threw her a curveball. "Let's have a race around the block tomorrow, you and me. If you can get that heap running, I'll give you the respect you crave." The challenge hung heavy in the air, taunting her. The race wasn't merely about the outcome. It represented everything she had fought for, a chance to confront Mark head-on and assert her right to be seen as an equal. She could feel her initial determination shifting into something fiercer. This had turned into a test, not just of skill, but of her very character. What did it mean to pursue respect? What would she be willing to risk? As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the workshop, she stared at her project with renewed ferocity. The night before, a race was always riddled with anxiety for contenders, but today, she felt something different. A burgeoning confidence that whispered she could go the distance. The challenge was set, the die cast. Tomorrow would mark the climax of her internal struggle, exposing the grit she had forged through perseverance. What consequences awaited as she drew closer to the brink? Would she emerge victorious, or would the shadows of doubt reclaim their hold? The answers loomed just beyond the horizon, and her heart raced as an electrifying determination coursed through her veins. Tomorrow would demand her all, and she was ready to confront whatever awaited. The morning light broke through the garage windows, like a chorus heralding Sarah's new beginning. The dust motes floated in the air, glimmering with possibilities as she stood before the polished performance car ready for their face-off. The anticipation crackled around her, a palpable energy that transformed her nerves into adrenaline. Today was not just another day. It was a culmination of every challenge and triumph she had fought through. As she prepared the car, adjustments to the engine felt second nature. The myriad of components that had once intimidated her now whispered secrets of mastery. Each tick and tussle of the wrench against the bolts was infused with purpose, the mechanics embodying her journey, the dedication, the persistence, the triumph of spirit. Mark sauntered over, his usual swagger tempered by something unrecognizable. The taunt receded slightly from his demeanor, replaced by a probing curiosity. "You really think you can take me in a race?" he asked, albeit with less mockery than before. She glanced at him, the echoes of past ridicule simmering beneath the surface. This moment was not about him. It was about standing tall in her own narrative. "I'm not just racing against you, Mark. I'm racing against everything that said I shouldn't." With those words, clarity washed over her. She wasn't merely challenging his perception. She was proving to herself that she could prevail even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As they lined up for the race, her heart pounded in rhythm with the roar of engines revving around them. Their fellow mechanics gathered, excitement sparking in the atmosphere. However, within her, the chaos transformed into a quiet resolve. She locked eyes with Joey in the crowd, his face painted with hope, the purest form of encouragement reflected back at her. "Stay focused! Just be you!" he shouted, the warmth of his words grounding her. The starting signal blared, and with it, the world transformed into blurred colors of possibility. Speed became her ally, the engineering of her father's dreams converting into reality against the asphalt below. The car surged forward, and every familiar switch and lever felt like an extension of her spirit. As they rounded the first turn, Mark pushed ahead, his competitive edge razor-sharp. But Sarah pressed on, weaving through obstacles not just on the track but within her mind. The insecurities that had once dogged her, the laughter, the doubts, they all began to fade. Fueled by unwavering determination, she inched ahead, pulling ahead of Mark at each curve. She redefined not just what it meant to race, but redefined who she was. Each mile carved out space for resilience, illuminating the darkness of uncertainty that had once dulled her shine. The finish line beckoned, and with a powerful roar, she crossed it, her victory eclipsing the shadows of past failures. Cheers erupted from the sidelines, echoing through the vibe of unbridled joy. Sarah felt the weight of every second she had spent fighting for recognition cascade away, allowing elation to fill the space left behind. As she emerged from the car, the mechanics approached with smiles and high fives. Respect glimmered in their eyes, a recognition earned, not given. They applauded her strength, a shift palpable in the air, marking her transformation from underappreciated mechanic to a fierce contender, a respected force. Mark's countenance shifted from disbelief to acknowledgement, his earlier bravado dissipating into something like respect. "You did good, Sarah," he declared. The echo of those words hung heavy, fusing with her sense of achievement. She had not only raised the bar, but shattered it, crafted a safe passage through the rough waters of doubt. Later, as she gathered her tools, a sense of fulfillment enveloped her. She had conquered both the race and her internal struggles. But more crucially, she had embraced her unique journey toward acknowledgement. Her identity was reinforced not just by triumph over Mark, but by a reclaimed legacy of strength threaded through her father's teachings. Sarah stepped outside the garage, her gaze sweeping over the horizon. The sky mirrored her newfound resolve, expansive, vibrant, full of potential. She could imagine future workshops and mentorships, sharing what she had learned, igniting passion in the hearts of others. With every step forward, she felt a renewed sense of responsibility, a purpose to inspire those who contended with their own doubts. As she looked at the path stretching ahead, she understood the profound truth. This was just the beginning of her story, a narrative where laughter did not conceal doubt, but instead became the soundtrack of triumph. Now was the time to sustain momentum and set a fresh course, a commitment to continue overcoming challenges while empowering others alongside her. She was ready to embrace all that lay ahead, knowing she had the power to create, both in engines and in lives. If you believe in the power of personal transformations and stories of triumph, you need to subscribe now to our channel. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion. Leave a like to energize the algorithm and comment your thoughts on Sarah's empowering journey. Your engagement matters and drives the stories that inspire change.